You are Locked On Wolves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Wolves POSTCAST, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. A big thank you for making us your first listen every single day and for joining us live on the POSTCAST tonight. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of the daily Locked On Wolves podcast, filling in tonight for Luke Inman here with Jack Borman, who you can find after each and every Timberwolves game right here on the POSTCAST. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. All right, so Timberwolves have now won 2 straight games, Jack, and this is obviously on the heels of a bit of a disappointing losing streak, to say the least. Three losses in a row. All 3 kind of fourth quarter collapses, albeit a couple of them against good opponents. And this is now the second straight solid opponent the Timberwolves have beaten. Yes, Victor Wembanyama is not playing for the Spurs, but the Spurs were 5-1 coming in without Wemby. So this is still a more than worthy opponent, and it's the first time all year the Wolves have beaten, actually, the last 2 opponents are the only opponents that they've beaten that are above 500 this season as of right now. So a really strong win, their second straight win versus a team above 500. The offense was really impressive. This was obviously a lot of offense involved in this game. Not a whole lot of defense. It was sloppy at times, especially early. But ultimately, the Timberwolves had a season-high 35 assists, and the ball was moving extremely well in this game. Part of that led to some of those turnovers, especially from Anthony Edwards. But Julius Randle tied his season high with 12 assists, and he only had 1 turnover. So while the Timberwolves as a team, 12 turnovers isn't a bad number, of course. 7 of them were from Anthony Edwards. Randle led the team with 12 assists. Nobody else had more than 6, and he only had 1 turnover. So, again, a strong offensive game, an encouraging win against a good team. Even without Wemby, this is a good team. The Timberwolves get to 125 points as they turn in a season-high 35 assists. Your thoughts off the top?
Yeah, I think for me, overall, it's just a really strong game for the Timberwolves. I think they hadn't had a comeback of greater than 10 points in any game this season prior to this yesterday, and they've now had 2 in the last 28 hours, which is, I think it just speaks to the overall resilience of their group. And I think this isn't a group that panics internally generally when things are going poorly. I think this is a group that has really good camaraderie, and I think that kind of shows in opportunities like they've had the last couple of nights. And again, it helps when both your stars are largely excellent, right? Ant and Julius combined for 54 points on 22 of 33 shooting. They were 6 of 11 from 3, and they only had 4 free throw attempts. So for them to be that efficient without getting to the free throw line, I think is excellent. And you nailed it with Julius Randle, tied a season high 12 assists. And I think for Randle, part of it too is the diversity and where those assists kind of ended up on the floor in terms of the shot profile. He had 6 assists that were 2s and 6 assists that were 3s. And the Wolves did a great job of isolating Julius Randle at the nail, whether it be on Keldon Johnson or Devin Vassell or whomever it was, or Harrison Barnes. And he did a really good job of driving right and then kicking back left. All 6 of the 3s that he assisted on were on the left side of the floor, either left slot or left corner 3s. And so I think for the Wolves, to have somebody that can really create 3s like that, I think is really important. Normally when you've got Ant back in the lineup, he's going to get a lot of them up. But I think for Randle, for him to be able to create those slot 3s and corner 3s is really important. And then just generally for the Spurs, I thought, again, this is the 13th time in the last 15 games De'Aaron Fox has scored at least 25 against the Timberwolves. He's just been a Wolves killer. I thought they did a much better job defending him in the second half, and more generally speaking, kind of turning off the Spurs water in the paint as it went on. And I also just had a really enjoyable time watching the Spurs for the majority of this game. I think the way that they get their guards the ball going downhill, diversity and kind of that inverted offense they have with Cornet up top was just fun to watch. They got Harper getting into the paint, had some really nice finishes on Gobert, and then obviously we know what Fox can do, getting inside, and then with the Gortat screens inside from Cornet too was nice. So it was just a fun game to take in here at Target Center, and nice to see the Wolves get their second straight win here.
Yeah, your point about De'Aaron Fox, he always kills the Wolves. And the second quarter, you talked about how much better they were in the second half defending him. The second quarter, they just were pick and roll with Rudy off the floor. It was just having De'Aaron Fox get to the basket, and the Timberwolves could not. I mean, even if Conley was guarding Fox, he wasn't staying in front of him. We saw that a couple of times. And then on the switches, Naz Reid wasn't staying in front of him. He generated shots for others. He, was taking threes. He was getting to the basket. And then the second half, like you said, they completely, kind of upended that. And it made things a little bit more difficult for the San Antonio offense. And Minnesota's offense never really slowed down. To that point, let's talk about tonight's player of the game.
This is the Locked On Player of the Game.
All right, Jack, who would you have as the player of the game in this one?
Yeah, I had Anthony Edwards, I think. Excuse me. Like I said, the Wolves were really resilient in this game, and they took the character, I thought, of their best player in this game. And I thought Ant, again, 5 turnovers in the first quarter for Ant, tied a career high for any quarter, had 6 in the first half, tied career high for any half. But he comes back. I don't think Ant had any in the second half.
I think he had one.
He had one in the second half. So I think for him, that was nice. I thought he set a good tone early too, right? He was in the mid post on the left side of the floor, tried to get through those step throughs, had 2 turnovers in a row, then comes back down, makes his next 3 shots in the next 5 possessions or something like that. And I just thought the way that he just kept playing, right? He didn't get discouraged by the turnovers. He didn't allow those to make him, kind of a passive participant in the game. I thought that he still just kept attacking and kept trying to create for himself and others. And, for him to have 5 turnovers, 0 assists in the first quarter, and then come right back with, I think, 4 assists and 1 turnover in the second quarter, I just thought was really good for Ant. The way that everybody kind of just rallied around him and told him, hey, just flush it was great to see. I thought for Ant, again, in that third quarter, Chris Finch does something that he doesn't really almost ever do, which was have both Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert on the bench. They had only 24 minutes this season where both of those guys were in the bench in non-garbage time minutes, and went to a lineup that had Conley, Edwards, Clark, Shannon, and Reed. And it really allowed Ant to just kind of get going, get him some space, and allow him to make some stuff happen in the middle of the floor. And he had 11 of 13 Timberwolves points at one point in the third quarter to just kind of help them stay in the game while they were hemorrhaging points on the defensive end of the floor. And I thought, that just kind of got some juice back in the arena that, then was really important heading into the fourth quarter. So I think for Ant, again, tonight, 32 points on 18 shots. That was 13 of 18 from the floor. He was 9 of 12 from 2, 4 of 6 from 3. And again, 32 points with only 2 free throw attempts is pretty darn good if you're Anthony Edwards. And so I thought just the resilience he showed tonight was unbelievable. And then I thought, when he did come back in the fourth quarter, he made it really difficult for Vassell to catch the ball and get involved in the action in a quarter that Fox sat for longer than we're used to seeing him sit in those types of moments. So Ant was fantastic and definitely was my player of the game tonight.
Yeah, I mean, sure, but like you can survive the 7 turnovers if you are that efficient. If you're 13 of 18, I mean, like, at some point on that scale, like, obviously you don't want to have 7 turnovers, but if you score 32 points, you only miss 5 shots. And like you said, he only shoots 2 free throws. The officials let really both teams play in this game. I did think it was, Ant got that technical pretty early, but nothing really changed. He still didn't get any calls. And it's what we're used to seeing every now and again out of Ant, where he just fights through contact and he doesn't get calls. And again, he was efficient enough that the 7 turnovers were manageable, and also nobody else on the team, like we already talked about, turned the ball over. So like this was a super efficient offensive game and a resilient game. I should mention as well, Julius Randle, like I 100% agree with you. I would say Ant's the player of the game. Julius Randle, like I don't usually put a whole lot into single game plus minus for individual players. He was a plus 30 in 36 minutes and in a game that they ended up winning by 13. Nobody else was better than a plus 14. Which is just kind of crazy. And
yeah, that's wild.
It's just a weird, and there was something like that. I think it was with Jaden maybe on Saturday where it was a weird, like the plus minus was way out of whack. And like Jaden's was crazy. Julius Randle plus 30, nobody else more than a plus 14, which is just crazy. And also this is something that like a trend that is a larger thing we can look at with the offense and defense between Randle and Gobert. Gobert didn't play at all in the fourth quarter. He played only 24 minutes, and we can maybe get to that a little bit later. He was a -8, and he was the only starter that was a negative in this game. The Wolves obviously pulled away in the fourth quarter, so that's a big reason for that. All right, we'll get back and talk about the bench. We'll talk about the rotation and Gobert a little bit later, but next year we want to talk a little bit about the turning point in this one.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
All right, what do you have for the turning point in this one, Jack?
Yeah, for me, it was the start of the fourth quarter for the Timberwolves tonight. I think, again, Chris Finch, like you mentioned, sits Rudy Gobert to start the fourth quarter, which he almost never does. And I thought that was interesting. And you're kind of betting on your offense playing really well. I think the Timberwolves were down like 4 points going into the fourth quarter. They immediately go on an 8-2 run to take the lead, which was great. I had sent out a tweet, but before the fourth quarter started, that they just needed more from Dante and Nas and Mike, especially from three, just because those guys had combined for 2 makes from three in the first 3 quarters. I think they had 3 in the first 3 minutes of the fourth quarter, and just for them to kind of take control of the game and just kind of ride the wave that the crowd created, I thought was awesome. On the non-Ant minutes in the fourth quarter to start, they had 21 points on 8 of 11 shooting. They had 8 assists on 8 makes, and they had 12 assists on 14 made field goals in the entire fourth quarter. That was their most assists in any quarter this season. And then I just thought that Mike and Dante, right, just really needed to hang in there if those guys were going to be out there against Fox and Harper and Vassell. And I thought that they did enough there. I thought they really competed hard on that end of the floor. And then just also a nod to the Wolves defense inside too, even without Gobert. I thought, too often paint points gets put on Rudy Gobert, but I think it also needs to get put on perimeter ball contain, especially against a team like San Antonio that has guards that are really shifty and can get in the lane and score when they get in the lane. The Spurs had 52 points in the paint in the first 3 quarters. And just for reference, the San Antonio Spurs averaged 51 on the season, and the league average is about 50 in a game. So to do that in 3 quarters is pretty impressive. And then the Wolves allowed only 6 in the fourth quarter. So I just thought that on both ends of the floor, they played really well. And I just love too that when Ant got in the game, he didn't try to monopolize the ball. He didn't try to disrupt the rhythm that everyone else was in. I thought he did a good job of getting off of it early. And instead of trying to focus on getting his, he just tried to fit in and play good basketball. And so it was a very fun fourth quarter to watch. And, I appreciated that Finch was kind of willing to try to switch things up and try something different at a time when I don't, think anyone really expected that of him.
All right, next we're going to get into who fudged up in this game. What didn't go well for the Wolves? We'll do that here next. Today's episode of Lockdown on Wolves on the Postcast is brought to us by our friends at PrizePicks. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. This holiday season is going to be one of the best times for sports bowl games, big basketball matchups, playoff pushes, and more. And it's all happening at once. Well, we're all making choices every day. One of the most fun places to make the right call is PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest way to get in on daily fantasy. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, lock in your lineup, and you're in the game. It's simple, fast, and it's available in 45 states. It adds an extra layer of excitement to the holiday sports schedule. Creating your lineup will take less than a minute, and the app makes the whole process smooth and intuitive. You can choose from a huge range of unique stats: fantasy score, field goals attempted, free throws made, turnovers, whatever fits your strategy. You could go into the game. The next Wolves game, I think, is Tuesday against the Pelicans, actually consecutive games against the Pelicans. Maybe you think Anthony Edwards will score more than the total that's listed. Maybe you think he'll have more 3-pointers made, maybe more turnovers, depending on who they play against this week. The early payout feature is a great bonus. When your lineup starts strong, you may get the option to cash out early. Plus, the new stacks feature lets you choose the same player up to 3 times in one lineup. More on a quarterback's passing yards, touchdowns, and rushing yards if you want to go that route. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us also by our title sponsors at FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. The live spreads and money lines will just instantly. Player props update as guys heat up. Plus, you can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, and every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. All right, we're going to close this thing out by talking a little bit about who fudged up for the Timberwolves in this game. We'll talk a little bit. Well, I don't want to spoil that. We'll talk about a couple other things here to close it out. But first, who fudged up?
Uh-oh, somebody messed up, and it's time to let them know with who fudged up.
All right, what didn't go right for the Wolves in this one, Jack?
Yeah, I think for me, it was just another night where the bench got outplayed, right? I think, again, I think how I look at the Timberwolves bench is obviously you have to consider that the Wolves have one of the best starting units in the NBA in terms of how well they're able to produce offensively, right? The Timberwolves this season, their starters rank fourth in terms of scoring at 87 points a game, but their bench is 28th at 31.5 per game. And so I think for the Wolves, that number is down to 28.5 per game over the last five. And the Spurs are scoring about 39 a game over the last five, which is top 10 in the league. And I think, again, early in this game, right, the Wolves just allowed Dylan Harper to get in rhythm. They allowed Keldon Johnson to get in rhythm right away off the bench. Kelly Olynyk came right in and were impactful. And I think the Wolves just kind of struggled to get that right. I mean, again, it's just kind of the roller coaster that this bench has been on. They had 38 against Oklahoma City with TJ and Naz combining for 30. That's great. They had 29 yesterday for Boston, where Naz, TJ, Mike, and Rob were 10 of 20 for 29 points. Like, that's fine, but it's not great. And then tonight they lost 48-32 before the bench emptied, and that was with getting 8 points on perfect shooting from Jalen Clark, who was tremendously impactful in the 11 minutes that he played, especially on the offensive end of the floor. And so I think for the Wolves to get outscored in both halves and just not necessarily know from night to night what they're going to get necessarily from anybody. I think, Naz's activity and his offensive production has certainly been better, but I just think, again, I don't know what needs to change. I'm not going to pretend like I have the answers in terms of the bench, but I mean, I asked Chris Finch before the game, how are they deciding between TJ or Jalen in the non-Rudy minutes? And he just kind of said, sometimes we're just going to decide we're going to go with TJ here. We're just going to decide to go with Jalen here. And he said that the team understands that different lineups matter, but sometimes it's just what the game might need, or just a guy that needs to get some minutes in that moment. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how they play that out over the course of the next few weeks, if it's going to be more matchup dependent, like it was a night like tonight where, they didn't totally need offense. They didn't totally need defense. They were just kind of throwing a bunch of different lineups out there. But I think that's going to be something that's important to monitor for the Wolves, because they just need consistent bankable production off the bench, and they just haven't gotten it. And I think it just puts a lot of pressure on Ant and Julius Randle for sure.
Yeah, agreed. And Naz, it just hasn't been consistent. It's been a roller coaster this season for Naz, and obviously, he had difficult circumstances coming into the year, but putting up a 15-6 is great in this game, and against teams that have thinner benches or have thinner front courts, that's going to be huge. At least Conley's shooting the ball well, but obviously the volume's not there. And the Jalen Clark, TJ Shannon thing, I talked about this a little bit the other day on Lockdown Wolves. The defensive lineups with Jalen Clark out there when Rudy's off the floor are pretty, like, you kind of need him out there when Rudy's not on the floor. But at the same time, he's not giving you anything offensively. He made his only 2 3-point attempts in this game, of course. But overall, like, he's the guy that teams aren't worried about. Whereas TJ Shannon has that upside as a scorer that can actually give you some consistent punch off the bench for sure. Any closing thoughts at all from this one, Jack? Anything that we want to peek ahead at, moving forward as the Wolves take on the Pelicans a couple times this week?
Yeah, I think one thing that I'd like to see is just kind of a little thing that I noticed in the second quarter. So the Wolves were basically in the bonus for the final 7 minutes of that second quarter and shot 0 free throws over the final 7 minutes of the quarter. I just think I'd like to see them kind of turn the knife a little bit and put more pressure on the defense when they do the work of drawing all those fouls. I think it's little things like that we tend to see from great teams. And that's the type of stuff we saw from the Wolves on their, stretch run last year and into the playoffs. And that's something that I just like to see them get back to, frankly. I think, it's just kind of little things like that have been costing the Wolves games. It didn't really have a material impact on the win or loss tonight. But again, especially with Ant and Julius, they probably could have ended up having, double the amount of free throws they had tonight, just with some calls that get or miss. But I just think that, everybody needs to, kind of pay attention to that stuff and just try to take advantage of the opportunities that they have, because teams' offensive ratings generally are significantly better when they're in the bonus versus when they're not. So I think that's something I'd like to look at. But again, like the Pelicans have been awful for the majority of this season, especially defensively. And I think it should be a good opportunity for TJ to get past the first line of the defense and finish inside. So I'm looking for TJ to get back on track. And then I'm really excited to see Julius Randle match up with Derek Queen, who's been, for my money, one of the most exciting players to watch in the NBA over the last 2-3 weeks or so. So it should be a lot of fun. And we'll talk to you then.
All right. Awesome. That's all we got for you tonight. Big thank you for listening to the postcast here at Locked On Wolves. Go live after each and every game. Luke and Jack typically both at Locked On Wolves and at Locked On Sports Minnesota. Be sure to subscribe and follow Locked On Wolves on all your favorite audio platforms as well as on YouTube. A big thank you for listening and watching. We'll catch you next time.